On my wedding day, not a single family member showed up. Not even my father, who promised to walk me down the aisle. They all went for my sister's baby shower instead. A day later, I posted one picture on Instagram. Less than an hour after that single post, I received 47 missed calls and text messages from them. What could have shaken them so suddenly? Keep listening to find out. They thought they were choosing the winning side in a family rivalry they invented themselves, but they forgot that the game was rigged from the start, just not in the way they assumed. My name is Aria, and for my entire life I've been the understudy to my sister Camilla's one-woman show. Our family operates less like a cohesive unit and more like a badly managed investment firm, with my mother Patricia as the frantic CEO and Camilla as the sole high-risk asset everyone's betting on. Camilla did everything right according to the unwritten bylaws of our clan. She married a man named Benjamin, whose family name Wellington carried the faint musty aroma of generational wealth, even if the reality was closer to generational debt disguised by designer labels. They lived in a pristine colonial house in Westchester County, where the landscaping was sculpted into anxious perfection and the conversations were just as rigidly controlled. Her life was a carefully staged production, and my family were the financial backers, perpetually applauding and hoping for a return on their emotional investment. I, on the other hand, was the off-the-books venture they never understood. I chose a different path. I chose Jake. Jake doesn't have a surname that gets him into country clubs or corporate boardrooms. He has hands that are stained with charcoal and paint, hands that bring imagination to life. He's a graphic novelist, a storyteller who works from a small sun-drenched studio behind our rented cottage in Cold Spring, New York. The space smells of coffee and creativity, filled with canvases and concept art for his upcoming series. To me, that scent is the fragrance of dreams taking shape. To my family, it was the stench of financial instability. They saw his vintage Converse sneakers and his intense, quiet focus, not as the uniform of a dedicated artist, but as the telltale signs of a man allergic to what they called a real career. They couldn't fathom a life that wasn't benchmarked by stock portfolios and zip codes. When I announced our engagement over Sunday brunch at the Riverside Country Club, the response was less joyful celebration and more a collective mournful sigh that could have powered a wind turbine. My mother Patricia deployed her signature look of pained disappointment, expression she'd perfected over years of my minor rebellions. "Aria, sweetheart," she'd lament, stirring her mimosa with mechanical precision, "it's lovely that you found someone who shares your creative inclinations, but one cannot frame inclinations and hang them on the wall of a house you can't afford." My sister Camilla was more direct, her sympathy as thin and brittle as spun sugar. "I just worry about you," she'd coo, inspecting her fresh manicure from the spa at the plaza. "It's such a difficult world without proper financial security." Her security was a trust fund that Daddy replenished with the predictability of clockwork every time Benjamin's latest investment opportunity turned into another expensive lesson. But they had no idea what was coming next. The ultimate power play came disguised as an unfortunate coincidence. Camilla, with a theatrical display of regret that would have made Broadway directors weep, announced her elaborate gender reveal party for the exact same Saturday as my wedding. She'd booked the grand ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, complete with a pink and blue cannons, a 5-tier cake, and enough floral arrangements to stock a funeral home. "Oh my goodness, Aria," she gasped when she realized the conflict, her hand flying to her chest like she'd been struck by lightning. "I had no idea. The party planner said this was the only available date for months. You understand, don't you? This is Benjamin's first child, the first Wellington heir. It's such a momentous occasion for both families." It was a tactical masterstroke of social warfare, a loyalty test wrapped in baby pink ribbons and presented as an unfortunate scheduling mishap. And my family, with the lemming-like predictability I'd come to expect, chose their side faster than you could say inheritance. They chose the promise of a Wellington grandchild and the spectacle of champagne toasts over the quiet, heartfelt vows of a daughter they'd long since written off as their biggest disappointment. My father William, the man who taught me to ride a bike in Central Park, who used to read me bedtime stories about brave princesses who saved themselves, had promised me he would be there. "I'll be there to walk you down the aisle, sweetheart," he'd said just 2 weeks before, his eyes meeting mine across the dinner table at Le Bernardin. "I'll just have to slip away from Camilla's party for an hour or so. Family is family, after all." He never came. The day of my wedding, my phone became a monument to their united front of indifference. I sat in the small bridal suite of the charming stone chapel we'd booked in Rhinebeck, an intimate venue overlooking the Hudson River that cost us 3 months of Jake's freelance income. A bride in waiting, watching the antique clock hands creep toward the appointed hour while my heart sank deeper with each passing minute. One by one, the texts arrived like perfectly crafted daggers of polite abandonment. So sorry, darling. Camilla is having morning sickness and needs me close by. Mother. The Wellington parents have cornered us for photos. Impossible to get away. Aunt Linda. And then the final gut-wrenching blow from Daddy. Things are really celebratory here. The announcement was incredible. So sorry, honey. Your sister's moment is very important to the whole family. Each message was a tiny, perfect encapsulation of my role in their lives, an afterthought, a secondary concern, an obligation to be regretfully cancelled when something more important came along. They weren't just missing my wedding, they were publicly ratifying my irrelevance in their carefully curated world. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock. At 10 minutes to 4, I was staring at my reflection in the antique mirror, a bride with no one to present her to her future. That's when everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the man who saved my wedding day. That's when Mr. Fletcher found me. He was our landlord, a distinguished retired ambassador who lived in the main Georgian house while Jake and I rented the charming cottage on his property. He'd come to the chapel to offer his congratulations and drop off a wedding gift, not expecting to find the bride alone and abandoned. He discovered me not in tears, but in a state of icy calm that probably looked more unsettling than crying would have. My iPhone lay face up on the marble vanity beside me, its screen a damning catalogue of unanswered calls to Mother, Daddy, and Camilla, each one a testament to my family's coordinated betrayal. Ambassador Fletcher was a man accustomed to reading international crises from subtle diplomatic cues. His kind, intelligent eyes took in the scene instantly, my untouched bouquet of white peonies, my solitary figure in ivory silk, and the incriminating evidence glowing on my phone screen. He'd spent decades navigating delicate situations in places like Geneva and Vienna, but I could see this particular crisis hit him differently. He looked at my dress, at my solitary figure, then down at his own impeccably tailored charcoal suit, the kind that whispered of Seville Row and decades of important dinner parties. Miss Aria, he said, his cultured voice carrying the gentle authority of someone accustomed to solving impossible problems, it would be my profound honor if you would permit me to escort you down the aisle today. And so I was walked down the aisle not by the father who forsook me, but by the dignified gentleman who collected our rent checks and had become more family to me in that single moment than my blood relatives had been in years. The wedding was intimate, maybe 30 guests, but it was filled with a warmth that could have heated Madison Square Garden. Our small circle of friends celebrated with an enthusiasm that more than filled the void my family had left. Jake's college buddies from Parsons, my co-workers from the non-profit where I coordinated art therapy programs, neighbors from Cold Spring who'd watched our love story unfold over morning coffee runs to the local diner. Jake's eyes, full of a love that needed no validation from trust funds or country club memberships, were all the family I needed in that sacred moment. When he slipped the simple white gold band onto my finger, a ring he designed himself and had crafted by a jeweler in the village, I felt richer than any Wellington heir could ever be. After the ceremony, as we mingled with our guests over glasses of champagne and slices of the lemon cake from Jake's favorite bakery in the city, Ambassador Fletcher approached us with the casual air of someone about to change our lives forever. I happened to overhear that a honeymoon wasn't in the immediate plans, he said, his expression one of gentle inquiry mixed with something that looked suspiciously like mischief. We had, of course, prioritized securing the lease on Jake's new studio space in Brooklyn over vacation. The larger workspace meant he could finally take on the graphic novel series that had been his dream project. Well, the ambassador continued, that's a situation that simply must be rectified. Ambassador Fletcher took out his phone and made a brief call, speaking in the easy, familiar tone of someone accustomed to moving mountains with casual requests. Charles, he said, his voice warm with genuine affection, it's Fletcher. I'm calling about that young artist I introduced you to, the one who's been working on the graphic novel adaptation of your grandfather's Arctic expedition journals. Well, he's just gotten married. Yes, today. To a lovely young woman who works in art therapy. Wonderful, my sincerest thanks, old friend. He ended the call and turned to us, his eyes twinkling with the satisfaction of someone who just orchestrated something magical. An old friend of mine, Charles Rothschild, you might know him as the maritime historian and philanthropist, insists you make use of his private yacht for the next 2 weeks as his personal wedding gift. His crew is already preparing the vessel at the marina in Newport. Charles Rothschild. The name hit me like a lightning bolt. The reclusive billionaire who'd made his fortune in renewable energy, then dedicated his life to preserving maritime history and supporting emerging artists. Jake had been working on a passion project for him, a visual biography of Rothschild's great-grandfather's polar expeditions. It was a commission Jake had taken for barely enough to cover supplies because the story had captivated his imagination completely. Jake had treated the eccentric philanthropist's family legacy with the same reverence he gave his own fictional characters, spending months researching every detail of those treacherous 1890s voyages through the Northwest Passage. He created stunning panels that brought the icy wilderness to life, making readers feel the bite of Arctic wind and the terror of ships trapped in crushing ice floes. And now that reverence, that artistic integrity my family had dismissed as worthless, was being repaid in a way we could never have imagined. The next morning, Jake and I stood on the polished teak deck of a sailing yacht so elegant it looked like it belonged in a James Bond film. The Northern Star was a 120-foot masterpiece of naval engineering, complete with a professional crew of 4 and enough luxury amenities to make the Plaza Hotel jealous. I held a crystal flute of Dom Perignon, watching the Hamptons coastline dissolve into a dreamy blue watercolor. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family had spent the previous day celebrating what they thought was their connection to real wealth and status, taking selfies with party favors and posting Instagram stories about Camilla's designer maternity dress. Meanwhile, I was sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than Jake's monthly student loan payment, aboard a yacht owned by a man whose net worth made the Wellington family fortune look like pocket change. I took out my phone and captured a single perfect moment, Jake and me, hands intertwined, with the impossible blue of the Atlantic stretching endlessly behind us. His other hand held his sketchbook. Even on our honeymoon, he couldn't resist documenting the beauty around us. The photo was poetry in motion, a testament to love that transcended bank account balances. The caption I wrote was simple, elegant, and about to detonate my family's carefully constructed world. The adventure begins. I posted it and immediately switched my phone to airplane mode. The real celebration was just beginning. 15 minutes after I'd posted that single photograph, my phone, despite being on airplane mode, somehow managed to collect a digital avalanche of notifications that would make a celebrity scandal look like a gentle spring shower. When I finally switched it back on 2 hours later, the screen lit up like a Christmas tree having an electrical seizure. 47 missed calls. 63 text messages. 12 voicemails. And the numbers kept climbing as I watched, each ping another crack in my family's composure. Jake and I spent the evening on the yacht's upper deck, sharing plates of lobster thermidor prepared by the ship's chef while watching the sun paint the Atlantic in shades of amber and rose gold. Every few minutes, my phone would buzz with another frantic attempt at contact, and we dissolved into helpless laughter. It became our entertainment, a real-time comedy show featuring the meltdown of people who'd built their entire identity around being superior to everyone else. Your sister's called 17 times in the last hour, Jake observed, sketching the sunset while balancing a glass of vintage Chablis. I think that might be a record. By the time we fell asleep in the yacht's master suite, a floating palace with Egyptian cotton sheets and a view that would make the Four Seasons weep with envy, there were 147 missed calls and text messages. The digital evidence of their spectacular panic was growing by the hour, each notification a small monument to their own misjudgment. I let them stew for 3 full days. 3 days of silence while Jake and I sailed down the coast, stopping at Martha's Vineyard for lunch at a waterfront restaurant where the chef personally thanked Jake for his work on a cookbook illustration project. 3 days of peace while my family's world crumbled under the weight of their own assumptions. On the third evening, as we anchored in a secluded cove off Nantucket, I decided it was time. The phone had registered 234 missed calls by then, a number so absurd it had stopped feeling real. I scrolled through the increasingly desperate voicemails, each one a masterclass in damage control disguised as concern. Aria, sweetie, we're so worried. Please call us back immediately. Mother, day 1. Where are you? This is getting ridiculous. Call me right now. Camilla, day 2. Your mother is having chest pains from worry. This has gone far enough. Daddy, day 3. The chest pains claim was particularly rich, considering Mother had posted Instagram stories from a spa day just that morning. The final call I chose to answer came from Mother herself. I let the phone ring until the very last moment, savoring my newfound power in this relationship that had always been so lopsidedly in their favor. When I finally picked up, I remained silent, letting the vast empty space of the ocean fill the connection. Aria? Is that you? Aria, for goodness sake, where are you? We have been beside ourselves with worry. The performance was so breathtaking in its dishonesty that it was almost admirable. They weren't worried, they were mystified, outraged, and confronting a narrative they couldn't control. And it was driving them absolutely insane. Time for the truth to come out. I'm on my honeymoon, Mother, I said, my voice as calm and steady as the horizon stretching endlessly before me. I could hear Camilla in the background, her voice a sharp, impatient hiss that carried clearly through the phone. Ask her where she got that boat. Ask her who's paying for it. This is absolutely ridiculous. Mother's tone pivoted instantly from manufactured concern to pointed cross-examination, like a prosecutor who'd just found a smoking gun. A honeymoon on a vessel of that magnitude. Your sister saw the photographs. We are all quite perplexed, Arya. Did Jake's family have resources you failed to mention? It would have been helpful to know these things beforehand. There it was, the frantic scrambling for any logical explanation that would keep their neatly constructed universe from flying apart at the seams. They needed Jake to be a secret heir, a trust fund kid playing at being bohemian, because the alternative, that they had made a colossal error in judgment based on their own superficial criteria, was an existential threat to everything they believed about themselves. They had to be the victims of my deception, not the architects of their own exclusion. This was the pivotal moment I had been unknowingly preparing for my entire life. I took a slow sip of my wine, watching a pod of dolphins arc gracefully through the waves like liquid silver in the afternoon light. No, Mother, I said, letting that simple denial expand in the silence like ripples on still water. Jake doesn't have a hidden fortune. He has something far more valuable, something your world doesn't have a column for in its ledger books. He has talent, integrity, and a reputation for excellence. And those qualities, it turns out, are their own form of currency among people who actually matter. The silence on the other end was so profound I could practically hear the gears of her mind seizing up like an engine without oil. I continued, my voice deliberately light and conversational, as if I were discussing the weather. The yacht belongs to Charles Rothschild. He's one of Jake's clients, you know, the maritime historian and philanthropist. He was so moved by the way Jake brought his great-grandfather's Arctic expedition to life that he offered this trip as a personal wedding gift. The whole thing was arranged by Ambassador Fletcher. The sound Mother made was like a balloon slowly deflating, a faint, strangled noise that spoke volumes about her crumbling worldview. Ambassador Fletcher, she repeated, as if the name were in a foreign language she was struggling to pronounce. The landlord? The quiet man who owns your cottage. The very same, I confirmed, watching Jake sketch a seagull that had landed on our railing. The man who graciously stepped in to walk me down the aisle when my own father was otherwise engaged with colored cannons and party favors. It's remarkable, isn't it, Mother? When you consistently treat people with decency and respect, regardless of their perceived net worth, they tend to remember it. You and Daddy should try it sometime. I could hear Camilla's voice rising to a full shriek in the background. This is a setup. She planned this. She did this deliberately to humiliate us. I smiled, a real genuine smile that felt like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. I have to go now, Mother. The crew has just spotted a migrating whale, and I don't want to miss it. Give my best to the family. I disconnected the call before the sputtering could begin, cutting that final toxic thread with a clean, satisfying snip that felt like the most liberating moment of my life. Turning to Jake, who was now sketching the magnificent humpback whale breaching in the distance, I realized the profound truth that had been hidden beneath years of family manipulation. By casting me out, they hadn't diminished me, they had inadvertently set me free on a grander ocean than they could ever have conceived. For 28 years, my family had made me feel like a walking apology, a disappointment they had to constantly explain away to their country club friends. They had appraised my husband based on the paint under his fingernails, never bothering to read the magnificent stories he created. They saw a quiet man in a modest studio and assumed his world was equally small, never imagining that this same gentle artist was held in high esteem by people whose influence stretched across continents. The 234 missed calls were artifacts of their own spectacular folly, digital ghosts of connections they had chosen to sever, celebrations they had snubbed, only to discover it was the only one that truly mattered. They hadn't just skipped a wedding, they had fundamentally misread the entire map of my life. Standing there on the deck of the Northern Star, salt breeze in my hair and my husband's hand warm in mine, I understood that wealth isn't measured in trust funds or country club memberships. Real wealth is being surrounded by people who see your worth, who celebrate your victories, and who show up when it matters most. Ambassador Fletcher had more class in his pinky finger than my entire family possessed collectively. Charles Rothschild recognized artistic genius where my family saw only financial instability. Jake's colleagues respected his talent while my family dismissed his dreams as impractical hobbies. I had spent years trying to earn their approval, dimming my own light to avoid outshining Camilla, accepting their scraps of attention like a grateful pet. But their rejection had been the greatest gift they could have given me. It forced me to build my own family, my own support system, my own definition of success. 3 months later, Jake's graphic novel series was picked up by a major publisher. 6 months after that, it won the Eisner Award. A year later, Netflix optioned it for a limited series. And through it all, my family watched from the sidelines, their social media feeds a constant reminder of opportunities they had forfeited through their own snobbery. They had taught me that love was conditional, that acceptance had to be earned through the right marriage, the right address, the right bank balance. But Jake, Ambassador Fletcher, Charles Rothschild, and all the wonderful people in our chosen family had shown me a different truth, that authentic relationships are built on respect, kindness, and genuine connection. I was no longer the family disappointment. I was the woman who chose love over status, adventure over safety, and authenticity over approval. And I had never been happier.